Hakeem Jeffries, of course, is, I mean, they're leaderless effectively at this point. Even if you ask them, like, who's the leader of the Democratic Party, they'll all be like, well, I don't know. But Hakeem Jeffries is the top Democrat in the House. And he was asked, you know, their phones are ringing off the hook with Democratic base voters who are like, what are you doing? Where is the resistance? Like, there was a video that came out last week of all of these Democratic members of Congress going to the Department of Education and wanting entry. There's one dude standing in their way, and they're just like, oh, I guess we can't go in that. I mean, and so
but what are they going to do if they go in?
There's such frustration that they seem to be asleep at the switch. And so in any case, Hakeem Jeffries gets asked about this dynamic, and effect was like, well, what could we really do? Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
I'm trying to figure out what leverage we actually have. What leverage do we have? They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency. It's their government. What leverage do we have?
So there you go. What leverage do we have? I mean, I do love, and I think it was Ken that pointed this out on Twitter, how when Democrats have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, it's like the Republicans are this immovable obstacle that they can't possibly get anything done. And when Republicans are in that situation, suddenly like, oh, they can just, you know, run roughshod and do whatever they
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I really am still really skeptical of this Democratic resistance because it just feels like a very elite media project right now. Like, it feels like the neurotic liberals who read the New York Times are very outraged, the bureaucrats, Washington, but it's a question too of like, what is the Democratic base? What do they actually want here? I mean, what would a bunch of silly Maxwell Frosts charging into the Department of Education do? I mean,
create a media spectacle. I mean, that's the thing is like,
to what
your
end?
only tool and lever is attention. That is your only tool and lever, really. And that is the failure of the Democratic Party is they do not understand, outside of like literally AOC and Bernie, they do not understand.
Does AOC really understand it though? I mean,
the
her
attention
style
economy? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Is her style of politics really going to be like her, going on Instagram Live calling Elon a Nazi? Like, do we really believe that that's a effective political strategy? I don't. I think he just looks silly. I think you look like a college liberal.
Well, let me say, at least she is doing something. But yes, in terms of understanding the attention economy, yes, I think she and Bernie are kind of the only two that truly do. And Bernie is impressed the hell. I mean, his man is really old, and he's still out there like, with, I think, some of the best messaging coming from the Democratic Party. But yeah, that's your only real lever and protest. And I would just say, like, I had all kinds of problems with the flavor of the Democratic resistance back in 2016. You know, Russiagate, I was a critic of, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, in some ways, it did work. We were talking about Trump's approval rating. They were able to keep his approval rating suppressed and under a majority the entire time.
Yep.
They did very well in the midterms. He lost in 2020. So there's been this, among elite elected Democrats, there's this assumption of like, oh, well, we tried this like all in Trump resistance and it didn't work. And it's like, well, but at least it did do something. Like, clearly just sitting back and letting it all unfold. And I think one of them said like letting him punch himself out is not going to do anything, and I think is foolish. So I think that there's two problems. One of them is they don't understand the attention economy and how that is your major lever for pushback and doing what you can to contribute to a genuine grassroots revolt, which again, there is something happening here because the level of calls that they're getting at the Senate, 1,600 a minute, is off the charts. Normie Democratic, like local Democratic voters are disgusted with the party and the fact that, and that is very different. You know, these people were like heroes to them previously. MSNBC was heroic to them, et cetera. That is all broken and gone. So in any case, that is the best thing that they have available to them. But the other problem, which gets to the Politico tear sheet that we can put up on the screen, is that, you know, really what they need to do is make an argument against oligarchy, make an argument against an Elon Musk and his billionaire buddies running the government. And that is going to require a choosing, a true, like, which side are you on kind of a moment. And you have leaders in the Democratic Party like Hakeem Jeffries, who instead is trying to go to Silicon Valley and mend fences with the billionaires who happen to be, and the 100 million, the mere 100 millionaires that happen to be on the Democratic side of the ledger. So he met quietly, they say, with more than 150 Silicon Valley-based donors last week in California, early step in Democrats' efforts to repair relationships with a once deep blue constituency. The meet and greet in Tony Los Altos Hills comes at a precarious moment for Democrats in the tech world, which is lurched rightward in the second Trump era. World's wealthiest tech mogul is upending Washington. Democratic leaders are facing criticism from their own base for their halting response. Jeffries, meanwhile, was on the West Coast, seemingly trying to avoid the next Elon Musk. Let's put this next quote up on the screen. This is kind of like the money quote, so to speak. So he says, there's significant fear that these tech folks who've been with us for a long time will say, F it, we're going with the other guys, said a major Democratic donor advisor. These donors are also pissed watching former and current colleagues have unlimited, unchecked power and getting richer off of this, and they're not. Democrats are trying to mend fences, and they're also trying to keep them in the tent, according to this individual. So, let's go ahead actually to the Nate Silver piece, because I thought D4. He broke this. This is D4. He actually broke this down pretty well. It's like, they need a billionaire strategy. You could be pro-capitalism or anti-oligarch, but the middle ground won't persuade voters. And the middle ground is kind of where the Biden administration was, because they did things that were genuinely adversarial, that this class of people hated, and the Wall Street people hated, and were pissed off. But the antitrust stuff was really adversarial. It was very unpopular among wealthy people. The aggressive enforcement at the CFPB, aggressive enforcement at the National Labor Relations Board, all of these things were deeply unpopular with billionaires. But rather than doing the FDR, and I welcome their hatred and embracing that as your identity, as we're going after these guys, they tried to do what Hakeem Jeffries is doing here. We still like you. We still want you in the tent. We're going to do these various cultural things that maybe you like, et cetera, et cetera. And that approach is not going to work. So Nate Silver is 100% right that this middle ground of what he describes separating the world into naughty and nice billionaires, which is what the new chair of the Democratic National Committee, what he floated as the appropriate approach here, that is not going to cut it. And if you're actually going to push back against, this movement and the Elon takeover and Trumpism in general, you are going to have to make a choice. You are going to have to either basically capitulate to that, or you're going to have to burn some bridges with the donor class, and they do not seem ready to make that choice.
Well, I don't think it's structurally possible. The Democratic Party is the party of elite, white, educated liberals and elderly black people. That's basically it. So, so if we look at the elite, white, educated liberals, these are NIMBY-style process, elite, institution-worshiping, neurotic master's degree holders who make approximately $200,000 to $300,000 per year. They love Reid Hoffman and all these other people. To the extent they hate Elon, it's because of, it's not because of CFPB. Should we put it that way? They hate him for being a traitor to their class or culturally right or whatever. Even a lot of these Silicon Valley donors, if you look at the things that they care the most about, it's going to be literally DEI and transgender issues. That's part of the reason the party is become the way it is. So how can you turn against oligarchy? If you don't have the voter base to sustain it, those people don't culturally trust you. Can you roll back 20 years of cultural left direction? I don't think so.
But that's what so the thing is, first of all, I don't think you're right about what the normie Democratic base wants. They are appalled.
What do they want?
They are appalled by what's going on here. They want to preserve the country. They want some, basic
they want to preserve their institutions,
increases.
Which they're in charge of.
I think you underestimate too how much the economic precarity has creeped up to upper middle class people, where it's not just the sort of traditional working class that feels that level of precarity. I also would say you very much overestimate where we are in terms of the realignment. Trump narrowly won, voters under, $100,000. He didn't even win a majority of the vote. He won the popular vote, but he did not even get to 50%. So you still have plenty of working class voters within the Democratic base coalition. So there's no doubt that the Democratic base is appalled at what they see unfolding under Trumpism. That piece is not a question to me whatsoever. And the Democrats have to your point, they have to regain some of those working class voters who voted for Trump this time around. They have to bring them back into the coalition. And if you're actually going to do that, I think you have to make a stand against Elon and oligarch control, and you have to have credibility with regard to, burning the bridges with, your own donor class. Now, where I see the more structural problem is that people like Hakeem Jeffries is not in this position because he's such a brilliant visionary or whatever politician. He's there because he can raise a lot of money. Nancy Pelosi, who does have some skills at least, but her main hold on power was because she was an absolutely prolific fundraiser. The vast majority of Democratic candidates are not there because there was a grassroots well of support for them. There's a few of them that could genuinely be said are the case. But by and large, the game that you had to play to get to power in the Democratic Party is all about sucking up to the type of people that Hakeem Jeffries is sucking up to. So as a party that has self-selected for that group of people who has these connections and whose primary skill set is raising money, are they going to cut off their own individual, politician to politician, are they going to cut off their own sorts of power? And that's where I think the real structural problem ultimately comes in, because if this was how you got into whatever position of power you have, you're not going to be really particularly amenable to completely changing course and orienting the party in a different way.
I think you're completely correct. I think it's a bidirectional problem, though, because it does get point taken, et cetera. But who is the center of gravity of elite Democratic thought? Ezra Klein, right? Nate Silver, people who work in NGOs, the New York Times op-ed page. If you look at that center of gravity, it's not one that's ultimately going to be consistent with an anti-oligarchy strategy. That's one that's really uncomfortable. I actually think your point about economic precarity at the middle class and upper middle class is important, because part of the blackpilling of the upper middle class has been very interesting to watch, and is actually also part of how you have this more elite turn against the Democratic Party, because they're also bleeding some voters in that category, which leads to people like Bill Ackman and all these. I'm not saying they're in that category, but I'm saying that creates a permission structure for white people who make 200 grand, who are grill dads or whatever, to say, okay, screw the Democrats, even though traditionally they had been. Whoever is left are people who are really into cultural liberalism on top of the Democratic Party coalition, which raises a lot of money from these same people. And I don't think that they have that credibility yet, because to do so, you'd have to burn down everything that you've ever stood for. You'd have to both shove this cultural BS to the side, pretend that you have never said any of the things that you have, and you would have to how could you revamp your entire fundraising structure? I mean, you talked about this with the Bernie guys, but Bernie bros are just Trump voters now. So can you win them back? I'm genuinely skeptical. I feel like once you have lost credibility with people on because it's a long burn period that the way that this happened, that they would so quickly be able to turn. I think that the way that the Democrats can win again is to drive up their suburban margins and then convince younger Hispanic and black voters to come back into the fold and vote for them. And that's really the coalition, at least in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that remains where their deficit was, on top, obviously, of white working class voters. But I'm not sure that those people are ever coming back. So I just think it's a very, very tough structural problem for them. I don't know how you could get out of this Gordian knot when you've elected the DNC person that you have, the good billionaire person.
Well, to be
honest with
you, though, what's interesting is, even though that dude did say that thing, the reason he got picked instead of Ben Wickler, they're both state party chairs, both from
he's Minnesota, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
One is Minnesota and the other one was Wisconsin.
Yeah,
so
right.
Ken Martin, the one that got elected, is Minnesota. Actually, what tanked Wickler's campaign is that he was seen as being too close to billionaires. So he was backed by Reid Hoffman. And he really had all the energy behind, when Emily and Ryan interviewed him here, it was very much thought, oh, this is going to be the guy. And because he was perceived as being too close to the donor class, that's why he lost. And actually, Nate talks about this here, but I also talked to Marianne about this as well, who also was involved in the DNC chair race. So she really saw it from the inside. And that was what really caused people to turn on him. So even at the, DNC, these are insiders. They're not all wealthy people, but they're just local Democratic Party chairs and whatever. They saw that as a real liability and a real problem for him, which was very interesting to me. But
that is really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, but back to the point of people who are not learning the lesson, whatever, we can put D3 up on the screen. So Senator Ruben Gallego has apparently he benefited to the tune of $10 million in his Senate campaign from crypto campaign contributions. And lo and behold, he's now the top Democrat on the Senate Banking Subcommittee overseeing digital assets, i.e. crypto, and is now hosting a luxury retreat with Mark Andreessen, who obviously one of crypto industry's biggest investors and cheerleaders. And guess one of the featured speakers at this event too was Matt Iglesias, which was kind of hilarious to me.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. So,
Matt, what are you doing, bro? You got plenty of money in that Substack. Please tell me you're not taking speaking fees. Oh, God.
he claims he wasn't paid to
Oh,
attend.
really?
He
Okay,
and
all right,
Gallego
fine,
are
fine.
just,
All
you
right,
know,
we'll
they're
take
just
it,
old
we'll take
buddies, whatever. But you know, the crypto industry is an important force. They really made an example of Katie Porter, who had been adversarial towards them, and one of them regulated under the SEC and whatever, and they dropped millions of dollars on her in her race, and she lost. And that was meant to, and it did, send a signal to anyone else who had thoughts of being adversarial and, you know, looking seriously at enforcement and regulation of the crypto industry, that you better sit down and shut up. And so even though some of the thought was that there would be a crackdown after SBF was exposed and all of that nonsense, actually they just got smarter. They put more money into politics. Crypto industry is now one of the biggest contributors
Well, they got richer. I
to
think that's
political
actually the key point.
campaigns. Well, and that's true too.
Bitcoin has literally went from like 30K to 100K in that time period.
And so, so now at this point, you know, you've got Democrats and Republicans, Gallego very much in their pocket, all kinds of other bipartisan officials very much in their pocket, them getting their way at CFPB, et cetera. And so, you know, it's quite noteworthy to have Gallego at this luxury retreat with Mark Andreessen.
Amusing, but also, remember, Gallego's a star, right? People have already floated him as, you know, he won in Arizona. Didn't he have the biggest point spread of any senator? For a Democrat who won?
You might be right.
Yeah.
No, for one who won.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for one
I
who-
think Tester probably did of like point
Right, but he
spread
lost,
overall. Sherrod Brown, I think, was second. But in terms of those who won, it might have been Gallego.
I mean, it's actually crazy because what did Trump win Arizona by 4 or 5 points? And then I think Gallego also won it by a few points as well. So it's almost an 8-10 point spread.
You know
just
what?
off the top of my head.
You know what Kirsten Sinema's up to now?
What? What
Sitting
is
on
she?
the board of some crypto bullshit.
No way. Yeah, it's too good. Too good. See, I would have thought she would have joined. What was it? What did she nuke? The carried interest loophole?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would have thought she would have become a venture
She might be
capitalist.
doing that too. I don't
Okay.
know, but I do know one of the things she's doing
Yeah.
is she sits on some crypto board now.
Just too
so.
good. Too good.
Congratulations.
Just as we predicted here on the show.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.